The Mongols are the descendants of the Xiongnu, the earliest mentioned in Chinese history. Except for a few in the northern mountainous forests who live by hunting and fishing, most Mongols live in the steppes and practice livestock farming, mainly raising cattle, sheep, and horses. In the 8th century, the Mongols were often subdued by the Dzungars, Dats, and the Khitan, Hoyhots. In the middle of the 9th century, the Mongols formed a coalition led by the Tartars. In the 11th century, this Tartar alliance broke up due to attacks from the Miao people. In the 12th century, the Mongols were repeatedly attacked by the Khwarezmian Empire and other powers. To this day, many Mongol tribes continue to live on the plains of Mongolia, including Inner Mongolia in China and parts of Siberia. Mongolian society traditionally forms nomadic communes where animals are collectively owned, and each tribe has a stable hunting or grazing area. Over time, a system of property rights developed alongside a culture of self-determination. However, wars between Mongol clans and natural disasters caused significant losses. On the other hand, Mongol leaders often gained prisoners of war, increasing their power. At the heart of the Mongol social structure was a leader called the Khan, who had great authority. These leaders were central to the unification of Mongol tribes. During this time, some tribes had slaves, primarily taken from prisoners captured during clan wars. By the end of the 12th century and the beginning of the 13th century, intertribal wars were more frequent, with some clans being defeated and others growing in power. The formation of the Mongol Confederation began with a series of alliances, led by prominent leaders. In 1189, the confederation was led by a powerful chieftain known as Temujin, who later became famous as Genghis Khan. In 1205, he unified the Mongol tribes, and in 1206, the Mongol Empire was officially established at a grand council known as the Kurultai. The Mongol Empire created a system of nobility to support the military and administrative functions. The Mongols introduced a policy where all able-bodied men between the ages of 15 and 70 had to join the army. Military commanders, called nobles, also served as local administrators. Thus, Mongol governance was a fusion of military and political power. The Mongol military organization was formidable, consisting of a core army with specialized units, such as a vanguard of 1,000 warriors and a guard force of skilled and loyal soldiers. Genghis Khan also established a system of laws and justice to maintain the power of the aristocracy. This created a feudal society with a military structure where the focus was not on agricultural production but on conquests. After the founding of the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan led a series of conquests that stretched across Asia and into Europe. His campaign against the Western Xia dynasty in 1209 marked the first major military success of the Mongols, after which they captured significant territories. In 1211, Genghis Khan led an invasion of the Jin Empire in northern China, and by 1214, much of northern China had fallen under Mongol control. In 1218, Genghis Khan turned his attention to the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia. A Mongol trade caravan of 500 men, loaded with gold and valuables, was sent to the Khwarezmian border. However, the Khwarezmian authorities mistakenly mistook the caravan for spies and executed them all. Only one man survived and managed to return to Genghis Khan. This incident became the catalyst for a brutal Mongol invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. In 1219, the Mongols launched a fierce campaign against Khwarezm, and by autumn of that year, the Mongols had destroyed several key cities. In many cases, entire populations were killed, while others were taken as slaves. This ruthless conquest was one of the many examples of Genghis Khan's brutal military strategy, which struck fear throughout the known world. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had created one of the largest empires in history, and his legacy as a conqueror and unifier of the Mongol tribes remained unmatched. Here's the revised version with the corrected historical facts and preserving the details. Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu, the last ruler of the Khwarezmian Empire, had to flee to India after his defeat by the Mongols. In a battle on the banks of the river Indus, he lost a significant engagement and was forced to abandon everything. He threw his horse over the river and retreated to the sub-capital Kerman. The Khwarezmian Empire was devastated. After his defeat at the Indus River, Genghis Khan confirmed his plans to attack India. However, the Mongols had to fight fiercely to conquer new territories, and so they retreated back to Central Asia. By 1225, Genghis Khan, along with his 3 sons, had crossed the Coved region and returned to Mongolia. During this time, as King Muhammad of Khwarezm fled to Lehigh, Genghis Khan made a critical mistake by taking his army with him. However, when the Mongols reached the coast of Lehigh, King Muhammad died. The Mongols invaded Azerbaijan and wintered there. In 1222, Subutai and Jebe, 2 prominent Mongol generals, invaded Georgia, crossed the Caspian Mountains, and advanced further north. In 1223, the Mongols defeated an army of 80,000 soldiers at the Battle of the Kalka River. After the victory, the Mongol generals celebrated their triumph over the Russian army. In the summer of 1226, Genghis Khan turned his focus back to the west. By mid-1227, Genghis Khan had conquered numerous cities and territories. But on August 25, 1227, Genghis Khan died. Before the end of the Middle Ages, it was said that the Western king Hanakhthan should be killed before his cremation. In the decades following, through the conquests of the Oath Wars and other campaigns, the Mongol Empire continued to expand. The Mongols established an empire spanning parts of Siberia, northern China, Central Asia, and the Caucasus region. While Genghis Khan was alive, he had divided the empire among his 4 sons. The Mongol lands were divided as follows. His eldest son, Jebe, controlled the western part of the empire, which included parts of Central Asia. His second son, Chagatai, ruled over the eastern regions, including modern-day Kazakhstan and parts of Central Asia. The third son, Ogedei, managed the area around Mongolia itself, while his youngest son, Tolui, was in charge of the Mongol territory in the east, from the Onon River to the Cha River. Genghis Khan is revered as one of the greatest and most influential leaders in world history. He united the Mongol tribes and created an empire that changed the course of history. The Mongols' relentless military campaigns and their raids across Europe and Asia struck fear across the world, laying the foundation for the next great empires. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his successors had to navigate the political complexities of the empire. In 1229, the Royal Assembly Kurultai recognized the expansion of the Mongol Empire. This Kurultai also planned further invasions, including campaigns into the Jin dynasty, Khwarezm, and even Western Europe. In 1230, the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan's son, Ogedei, attacked the Jin dynasty and began their march to the south, opening the door to a new phase of warfare. In 1232, the Mongols attempted to negotiate with the kingdom of Namtung, later part of the Song dynasty. They promised to hand over territories in exchange for military cooperation against the Jin dynasty. By 1234, the Mongols, in alliance with Namtung, managed to capture the Jin capital and killed the Jin emperor, ending the Jin dynasty. At the same time, in 1231, the Mongols began their campaign against the Korean kingdom of Goryeo, which eventually resulted in the Mongol occupation of the kingdom by 1253. In 1236, under the command of Batu Khan, a Mongol army of 150,000 troops marched westward. In the winter of 1237, the Mongol army launched an invasion of Russia. By the end of 1238, the Mongols had conquered numerous Russian states, including Moscow. By the end of 1240, the Mongols had destroyed the city of Kiev. In 1241, Batu divided the Mongol forces into 2 groups to invade Hungary and Poland. The Hungarian king fled, but the Mongols pursued him to the southern coast near Venice. Russia, much of Europe, and even the Holy Roman Empire feared the Mongol advance. Despite several victories, the Mongol forces were exhausted and could not continue their push deep into Europe due to the death of Ogedei Khan, which marked a turning point in Mongol expansion. In 1242, Batu Khan had to return east to form an army along the Volga River. Due to his conquests, the region of Chagatai was expanded and established as the kingdom of the Khwarezmian Empire. Meanwhile, in 1241, Ogedei Khan passed away. After 5 years of struggle for succession, in 1246 the royal council appointed Kort, the son of Ogedei Khan, to the throne of the Great Khanate. 2 years later, in 1248, Korchio died, and the fight for the throne continued. In 1251, Mongke Khan was elected as the new Great Khan. After ascending the throne, Mongke continued organizing invasions targeting Western Asia and the south. In 1252, in order to strengthen the defensive position of the Song dynasty, Namtong, his second brother Kublai Khan, was sent by Mongke to lead an army to conquer regions such as Tusu, and then proceed into Yunnan to defeat the Dali kingdom. In 1253, Kublai Khan led a group of forces to attack Tibet and subsequently returned to the north. In 1254, Tibet surrendered. In early 1258, the Mongols attempted to invade Vietnam. However, the Vietnamese, led by Emperor Tran Tai Tong and his general, Nguyen Trung, successfully repelled the Mongol invasion, marking a major setback for the Mongols in Southeast Asia. In 1258, Mongke Khan, the Great Khan, led his army to attack the Yuan dynasty, which controlled northern China. In 1259, Mongke Khan again led his forces to conquer the southern regions and brought troops back to fight. In 1260, Mongke organized the meeting of the Kurultai in Karakoram to solidify his position as the Great Khan. In the west, since 1253, his third brother, Hulagu Khan, was leading fierce campaigns against Western Asia. By 1258, the Mongol army had captured the Arab Caliphate and destroyed the Abbasid dynasty. The Mongols then attacked Syria, Egypt, and other regions of Western Asia. However, in 1260, the Mongol troops faced defeat at the hands of the Egyptian Mamluks, halting their advance. The conquered territories in Western Asia, including parts of modern-day Iraq and Iran, fell under Mongol control but became heavily independent from the central Mongol rule, establishing semi-autonomous regions. During this period, the Mongol Empire stretched across a vast area from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. Although the Mongol Empire was expansive, it struggled with internal divisions from the very beginning. The empire was divided into several khanates, including the four main regions that governed Mongolia, Manchuria, northern China, and parts of Central Asia. By the early 14th century, these territories had split further into 5 regions, each with its own rulers and varying degrees of independence from the central Mongol authority. The territories of the Yuan dynasty, Khwarezm, and Ilkhanate were the most prominent divisions. By 1311, the territories of the Yuan and Ilkhanate khanates merged into one. The empire continued to fragment, and the political, cultural, and religious differences between the various khanates led to increasing disunity. By the 14th century, many regions no longer recognized the authority of the Great Khan, and each region developed its own history, separate from the Mongol Empire. The remnants of Mongol imperial influence were still felt in the early 20th century in regions like China and Russia. In the 13th century, Mongol emperors such as Kublai Khan and his successors initiated many military campaigns in Asia. For example, in 1266, the Mongols, under Kublai Khan, sent emissaries to Japan demanding that Japan submit to Mongol rule. When Japan refused, war became inevitable. In 1274, the Mongols launched their first invasion of Japan, capturing the islands of Tsushima and Iki and landing on the island of Kyushu. However, they were forced to retreat when they realized they did not have enough forces to continue their advance. In 1281, the Mongols launched another attempt to invade Japan. Under the command of General Athap Hai and others, the Mongols led a large army, but they were once again thwarted by a massive storm that destroyed many Mongol ships. More than 10,000 Mongol soldiers were stranded on the Japanese shores, and the invasion ended in failure. In 1286, Hulagu Khan shifted his focus from Japan to the Indian Ocean region. In 1271, the Mongols, under Hulagu's command, made several unsuccessful attempts to invade India. Despite repeated campaigns against Burma in 1277, 1283, and 1287, the Mongols were never able to fully conquer the region. The Burmese had to surrender and in doing so, handed over the seal to the Mongols, leading to the subjugation of the Burmese kingdom by the 3 brothers, including Athinka. In 1298, Athinka captured the Burmese king and imprisoned him. The son-in-law of the Burmese king, along with others, fled to China. Using deceit, in 1300, the Yuan dynasty, Nguyet and Kailan, invaded Myanmar for the 4th time. Surrounded by the Yuan army, the brothers Athinka and Ka Dio brought large quantities of gold to buy off enemy generals. However, the Yuan army suffered from the heat and their morale waned. The Mongol forces retreated, and upon returning to their country, 2 of the leaders, Tao Khan and Sathan Hoa, were executed for their failure in the invasion. The Champa kingdom, Chimthan, also became a target of the Mongol Yuan regime. In 1279, the Mongols, under the leadership of Hothat Nguyet Sai, demanded that the king of Champa send tribute to the Yuan court. However, the king of Champa refused to allow the Mongols to establish a military presence in his territory. As a result, in 1283, the Yuan army attacked Champa's capital. The king of Champa, to avoid direct confrontation, burned down his warehouses and temporarily retreated into the forests. He then pretended to seek peace, hoping to lure the Mongols into an ambush. The Yuan army was caught off guard and had to fight hard to escape. By early 1284, the Yuan forces were forced to retreat. Despite the setbacks in Champa, the Mongols did not give up their ambitions in Southeast Asia. For Vietnam, after the failure of the first invasion in 1258, the Mongols, led by the Great Khan, sought to conquer Vietnam again in the following years. In 1285 and 1288, the Mongols launched 2 large invasions, both of which were defeated by the Vietnamese forces under the leadership of the Tran dynasty. During the second invasion in 1285, the Mongols mobilized around 50,000 troops, considered one of the largest and most formidable armies of the time. However, the Vietnamese, led by Emperor Tran Tai Tong and General Tran Hung Dao, successfully repelled the Mongols on both occasions, proving their military prowess. In 1292, the Mongol Yuan dynasty, under the leadership of Hulagu Khan's forces, attempted to conquer Java but were defeated by the forces of the Javanese king, Ratanagara. At the end of 1292, the Yuan army suffered a defeat and retreated with 2,000 troops and 1,000 ships heading to the south. By early 1293, they reached Java, where they found the Javanese king besieged by a coalition of enemies. However, the Mongols were unable to maintain their advantage, and in the end, the Mongol forces were repelled. After the Yuan dynasty took over China, although the Mongol rulers were foreigners, they established their dominance over Chinese society, creating tensions along ethnic and class lines. The Mongols promoted policies that favored Mongol elites over the indigenous Chinese population, leading to deep divisions in society. These divisions sparked various rebellions, including the rise of the Red Turban movement, which was led by Zhu Yuanzhang. By 1367, Zhu Yuanzhang had captured much of southern China, and in 1368, he declared the founding of the Ming dynasty after overthrowing the Yuan dynasty. At the time, Korea was divided into small states. Korea had no direct connection to the Mongols until the 15th century, when it became disintegrated into smaller states. These states persisted until the end of the 17th century, even after losing parts of their territory to the Tibetan Empire. The invasions of the Mongol Khanates and their successors had lasting negative consequences for Mongol society. The Mongol population became dispersed across Asia and Europe, with some communities becoming very isolated and cut off from the Mongol heartland. As a result, the Mongol population dramatically decreased over time. The internal wars that followed the Mongol withdrawal from China, coupled with constant battles between the Mongols and the Chinese, contributed to Mongolia's unstable political situation and hindered economic development. This instability created the conditions for the rise of the Qing dynasty in the early 17th century, which marked a significant historical shift. In 1636, the 49th Mongolian General Assembly convened in southwestern Mongolia under the Qing government. Southern Mongolia was officially incorporated into the Qing Empire and became known as Inner Mongolia. That same year, the Qing Empire changed its name after the fall of the Ming dynasty, and the Chinese government began to expand its control over the northern and western regions of Mongolia. By the end of the 17th century and into the 18th century, these lands were fully integrated into the Qing Empire, effectively colonizing all of Mongolia.